very shortly. US President Donald Trump used his State of the Union address to allege widespread fraud in Minnesota, claiming mismanagement and abuse of public funds. Trump did not provide specific evidence, but said his administration would investigate what he called systemic failures. He argued that fraud undermines public trust and said his government would hold officials accountable. The comment drew immediate criticism from Democrats who dismissed the claims as unsubstantiated and politically motivated. The remarks added to a partisan tone that defined much of the speech. The White House offered no further details on the alleged fraud, while Minnesota officials denied any wrongdoing and said the claims lack evidence. We are now being rejoined by Himanshi. Thank you for rejoining up with us here for this. How has any of this really, how have they gone from saying that Minnesota has committed fraud? What did Trump mean by calling Minnesota a stunning example of corruption in his State of Union speech? And how has the administration's framing of alleged fraud there been challenged by the fact checkers and local officials?
See, this reflects tensions in American democracy. During the State Union address, when Trump said this, that there is a fraud in elections of Minnesota, it is something that symbolizes deeper ideological divide in the United States. See, United States' greater strength is the geopolitical strength, and historically, it has been institutionally very stabilized. However, when you do these repeated public allegations of electoral frauds, this will somewhere contribute to the erosion of faith in the democratic process, the institutional delegitimization, and also amplification of adversarial state. So somewhere, when internal trust declines, people are going to exploit it. And when we see Minnesota as a public system, it represents progressive urban politics, and we also see the Midwest battleground dynamics. We also see cultural debate around immigration and identity. We had seen how the ICE and Home Guard security had came down heavily. We had seen those protests happening where people were killed. So when Trump is targeting, the states frames a broader ideological war, it shows us that nationalism, versus the progressive multiculturalism. It also shows us the electoral integrity versus the systemic bias claims. And when Omar Ilhan's narrative we see, she's one of the most internationally visible progressive US lawmaker. And her political identity intersects the immigration politics, the Muslim representation in the Western democracy, and also the US foreign policy criticism. So a public clash between Trump and Omar is not just a domestic thing. It is also going to be broadcasted globally. Today we are discussing it as a cultural symbol of war and the democratic stress test. And it also shows us the debate of how Trump reacts to things which are not in his favor or he does not agree to. And this will have international repercussions also, because when US President Trump publicly alleges fraud in a state during formal constitutional address, the global leaders will observe it as, questioning the stability of US electoral system. It can also risk internal unrest, and it will also somewhere influence the predictability of American foreign policy. So I think they should, be more careful about what they're coming out and speaking in public. Ellie.
Thank you, Himanshi, but please don't go anywhere, as I will be joining back with you very soon. Tensions escalated during President Donald Trump's State of the Union address at the Representative Ilhan Omar accused him of lying about fraud in Minnesota. Trump was called a liar by Omar as he linked the Somali community to corruption in the state. In response, Trump criticized blue states for fraud and called for tougher immigration policies. The clash intensified when Omar and Representative Rashida Tlaib shouted Americans are being killed as Trump defended his immigration stance. Democrats, including Omar and Pramila Jayapal, voiced their frustration, refusing to stand during Trump's remarks on protecting American citizens. We're now being joined once again by Himanshi Singh. Thank you for joining us back here for this. How did Trump's comments on immigration enforcement and alleged corruption in Minnesota spark one of the most visible confrontations with Omar and other Democratic lawmakers in the House chamber? And does Omar's public rebuke of the president during traditionally a formal address reflect a broader shift in the White House right now?
Ellie, we must understand that when people get personal, it becomes dirty. And Trump is trying to get very, very personal with Ilhan Omar. She's a Somalian American Muslim lawmaker, and it's a very, very vocal critic of US foreign policy. And she's also a symbol of progressive multicultural America. So when Trump clashes with Omar, the conflicts become more of ideological theater, because this shows us the nationalist populism versus the progressive globalization. On one side, America opens its gate for everybody. Then they come down and they want to close, and they want to have some sort of funny immigration laws where people are killed by the ICE and Home Guard. And when somebody is very vocal about the wrongdoings, Trump takes it very personally. So, however, as an international observer, we can see it, something like identity versus the personal crisis, and immigration debates will spill into executive discourses and democratic wrestling with the democratic transition, which this is what we are seeing. So somewhere, this sort of extreme polarization results in people becoming more and more radical. There will be civil unrest, and cyber interferences will increase because you want to keep a watch on who's doing what. So somewhere you are also posing a bigger question on the electoral system. So you are actually questioning the own democracy and the people who have come out of the elections through that democracy. So somewhere, this divide is making democracy more and more vulnerable to influence operations, to which I think Trump must understand that this is not about the legitimacy of discourses. It is also about questioning the authority of its own democracy and the largest democracy like America.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Himanshi Singh, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. The Trump administration has imposed a $126